So I'm going to go ahead and pop the fly in the vise, and then I want to see if you all can see it all right. All right, how's that coming in? Give me a thumbs. I can still see your camera, so give me a thumbs up if that's looking good. Awesome. Okay. So as you can see, this guy's, he's clocking in like maybe 3.5 inches or so. Yeah, about 3.5 inches. Between 3.5 and 4, especially for early season smallmouth. Go smaller. Most of the critters haven't had a chance to grow yet in the spring, so going smaller with your baits is kind of like a nice way to be able to search and find fish, even if there's smaller ones that are going to pick them up. That's usually what I'll fish, is about that 3.5 to 4 inch range, especially in the spring. So the first thing that we're going to start off with is our jig hook. So if you haven't already done this, go ahead and get your jig hook, put your cone head on it, and then you notice that I have an uncrimped barb, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. Go ahead and get in there and crimp those barbs. Crimp that barb, don't hurt that smallmouth. I want to be able to let them go really easy. So that's what it's going to look like in the vise, just like that. Really easy. We're going to come in with 0.30 lead wire. If you don't have any lead wire, don't worry about it. Adding the lead wire is just a way to add a little bit more weight. It'll drop it down a little bit faster if you have a run or something like that you're fishing it in. So I'm going to come in with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. That's 15 wraps. That's more than enough. Kind of spiral it off. And then we've got this little tag back here. Oftentimes what I'll do with that is I'll press these together and then I'll start to wind it around. And then as I get it wound around, I've got this little tag sticking up. Here's a little trick. Use the back of your thumb. I've got my back of my thumbnail on this thing. Twist one way here and twist backwards with your thumb. And this is going to tighten all of that lead on there. So I'm going to push with the back of my thumbnail and twist together. I'm just twisting the two sides. And then if you want to compact it further, oftentimes what I'll do is use the cone head to push against it like that. Now where I want this to be seated is just up from the bend of the hook. So I kind of want to even out the weight in the fly. If you can imagine that, most of your density is up here in the front of the fly where your brass cone head is, and you're going to have a lot of like water soaking materials that are right in here, as well as thread wraps. So to even out some of that kind of weight in the front, I kind of situate those lead wraps slightly further back. And that's going to help it kind of drop more evenly. It's going to drop about like that, actually. The front's still going to be a little heavier, but that helps even things out just a little bit, which is nice. Then I come in with, okay, you can use any thread you want. Doesn't really matter. I like 140. If you go with anything smaller than 140, I think it's a little bit easier to break. But I have also used, that was a UTC thread in 140, but Danville's 210 and a Flymaster Plus in kind of this rust color is good too. But just whatever you've got, not a huge deal on the thread. Then we're going to come in on the front of this thing, put a few wraps on it. Then what I'll do is jump all the way to the back of those lead wraps and put wraps in there. Then I'm just going to kind of diagonally wrap across the lead wraps, put some more in the front. And what I'm trying to do is just get a little bit of a thread base over these lead wraps. Definitely get the front and back situated with enough thread wraps that it will hold it in position. I'm not going to go crazy with my thread on covering these lead wraps because I'm going to cover them in a different way here in just a minute. So I'm not terribly worried about that. But then we want to come in with our zonker strip, right? So I'm going to use the, this is by Hairline, Magnum Rabbit Strip in Crayfish Orange. So these kind of have this really cool mottled rust color to them, but you don't have to use something like this if you don't have it. Whatever zonker strip you've got in like a brown, something natural color is usually what I'll start with. Not warm enough for too crazy colors yet, I don't think, this time of year. And what I've found, I've started ordering them. Well, I've often ordered them from Mertens, but if you order an entire hide and then cut it yourself with razor blades, you get an insane value if you're going to use a lot of zonker strips. So oftentimes what I'll do is just like mark that hide with a marker and then cut it with a little double-edged razor blade like this. and you end up with hundreds of Zonker strips for 10 bucks instead of buying a bag that has 3 in it like this for 5 bucks. So that is definitely a way to save a lot of money. So on these Zonker strips, they have a, that fur has a grain, in other words. So there is a way that it's facing where it will kind of lay down flush. See that? If you pull it the other direction, you'll stand it up, right? Well, we want to lay it down flush like this. So we want to work with the grain. This is about a 4.5-inch piece, which is probably more than we need, but I like to have a little bit of extra. But essentially we want this tail sticking out, about a shank and a half length back at the most, because we want to be able to have enough up here in the front to lay down a body, but we also want to have enough here in the back that we can kind of cut off and taper the back end if we wanted to. So I like to start with about that much, about a shank and a half. So what I'll do is come down here, once you have your length, and press it into the point of the hook and push it right onto the point of the hook. Now what you'll do is open your vise, pull out your hook, slip that upwards. Now you've got all these fibers down here that you don't want to catch as you reattach your hook into the vise. So kind of lift them up out of the way, sink that right there, and cinch back down. Now you've put a hole essentially through that thing. See that? It's a pretty common tactic for attaching a rabbit strip to a shank. And then some people won't do this next part, but I like to do it for a little bit more reliability. It'll be a little bit more resilient. I'll pull these fibers forward and I'll pull these fibers back. And I'm kind of splitting the fibers where my thread is. In fact, I'm going to go just a tad further, about right there. So I'm kind of splitting those fibers, and then I'm going to take my thread and just go over the top. I'm going to do this maybe 5 to 7 times. And the more wraps you get on there, the more you can kind of work your thread around in there. Just like that. So once I have those thread wraps seated, if you pull on it, you're going to make your Zonker strip curl around the hook shank with thread tension. So I'll hold on to it, and then I'm going to pull on my thread to tighten it up. Then I'm going to lift everything backwards out of the way, and I'm going to come in front of the Zonker. All right, so I can see a few cameras. I can't see everybody, but if I'm going about the right rate, give me a thumbs up. If I'm going too fast, let me know. I need to slow down. All right, I see a thumbs up, so cool. All right, so at this point, we want to cover up those lead wraps, right? We don't necessarily have to. It wouldn't hurt the fly if you didn't put anything there. The original pattern calls for a little braid on there, but I like, because it's kind of flashy and has some UV in it. This is UV polar chenille. Again, it doesn't matter what you put on this body. You can put braid, you can put regular chenille, you can put Palmer chenille. This is a UV polar chenille, and I've gotten used to this because a lot of guys that order this fly from me insist that the body be covered with this UV polar chenille. Now they're fishing for bull trout, brown trout, tiger trout a lot of times. So I don't know if they just believe in the UV that they're using, or if it's the flash that's in the material, but they really seem to like the fly to have a lot of this UV flash in it. So I've been using this a lot. And so I've tied up some of my smallmouth flies with it, and I'm going to test it this season. Most of the time, before I use this UV polar chenille, I just use a regular Palmer chenille on the belly of these flies. But since this one has some UV in it, I'm going to go ahead and use that. We're going to just lash it onto the side. And we're going to come forward. We're not going to get too fancy with this part. We're just going to cover it up. And we've got this UV polar chenille sticking off the back. Then oftentimes I'll just put a little whip finish in it to get my thread out of the way. And then I'm going to just wrap it forward with close concentric wraps. Now this stuff is long, so it kind of has a direction that it wants to go. You want it to be facing backwards this way to the back of the fly. If you can get it turned that way, that's the best way to do it. That way it'll lay on there flat for you. Mine's kind of coming forward. So I'm just gonna hold it backwards like this, then do another wrap, hold it back, do another wrap. I'm just gonna work my way forward. I'm gonna get just past the half point mark on that shank where I've got quite a bit of that material in there. Then I'm gonna come back in with my thread, do a trap wrap on it. 1, 2, 1, 2 in front, a few more, and then I'm going to come in and clip it out. All right. So really easy, just like, you know, palmering a hackle on a woolly bugger or chenille on any other fly. But you have these really long fibers, right? So what I'm going to do is just kind of hold those back, and I'm going to really wrap over the head of this stuff so that if I didn't grab it good with that trap wrap, wrapping over it like this, there's no way that it gets back out of there. So this is going to make a really resilient fly. Now, if this stuff seems too long to you, you can kind of pull everything up. This is oftentimes what I'll do on a customer fly, is I'll pull everything up and I'll cut it out right there, right? So that it kind of tightens up the look of the fly. But for smallmouth, I want it really buggy. I want it to look really wild and give it as much density as possible. So I'm going to leave the length. So what I'll do is kind of pull down on it, pull the fibers out of the way, and then lay my zonker strip on top of it. Just like that. So now we got our zonker back here, and you can actually see the tail start to be created. Now this stuff is all sticking down, and it looks kind of funny right now, but when it gets wet, it's going to lay nice and flat against the fly. So what I'm going to do is I'm holding on to the front fibers of that zonker strip. I've got it split just ahead of the point that I actually want to tie it in at. And the reason for that is there actually is a reason why we don't split it right at the point we want to tie it in at. Because if we cover it right here, we press down on it and we create a little bulb of a shoulder. And that's going to give us a little bit more profile on the fly. So I'm just going to put one wrap over the top here. 2, 3, 4. Cinch down a few in front just to trap it in like that. Pull down again. And then we can cut out our excess. Get this tightened up, get my thread pressure again. There we go. So I'm going to come in with some fine point scissors. I'm just going to clip out the front. So now we can do away with the rest of that rabbit strip. Oftentimes I'll save these because what I'll do is sometimes put them in a dubbing loop and cut the flesh off of them and spin them up into a dubbing loop and make a collar for a fly or something. But you can reuse stuff like that. But now we've got this this point on the front of the fly where we've got a little bit of zonker exposed still. So I'm going to come back in, just kind of cover it up. Don't get too crazy with covering it up because we're going to cover it up with other materials. So then we're going to come in with some more flash. You don't have to make your fly as flashy as this. I always think if I put some flash in, I can always cut it out later if I seem to be spooking fish. If I don't put any flash in and I'm trying to get a fish's attention, you know, you can't add flash later, right? So I'm going to come in with another Fly Tires Dungeon product. I feel like I talk about them all the time, but they just have some of the best materials for the cheapest prices. This is their, it's a Flashaboo. They call it their H2O multi-mix. This is Volcano Red that I'm going to use. And this stuff, you get a huge pack of it. So you just get a massive hank of this stuff. And it's like I don't know, like $1 or something like that. It's crazy. But this is a really cool red and orange mix in this Flashaboo. So it's great for making these crayfish flies. So I'm going to take, 5 or 6 strands of this, and I'm just going to cut it out. And what I end up with is something that's about 9 inches or so long. So I'm going to put it in half, just like this, just like that. And I'm going to cut it in half, just like that. So now I've got a packet that is only about 4 inches long. And then I'm going to do something called tapering the ends. So whereas all of these ends are straight across, I'm just going to kind of pull on them to add a little bit of taper in there so that they're not all exactly the same length, and it'll make it look more natural. And then this is kind of a technique that I learned from a YouTube video from one of my favorite streamer tires. But what he does is he holds them up to the side of the fly, just like this. You got the whole bundle, and I'll put one loose wrap over the top. Then I'll put a couple more and pull the whole bundle on top of the fly. Now I've got all the flash on top, right? What I'll do is kind of spread it out with my fingers off to the sides. And then all this flash in the front, you can do two things with it. You can tuck it underneath the fly so that you have flash underneath, but we already have flash under here. So I'm going to spread it out on top of the fly with a cool little like thumb technique that I learned. You just press your thumb into it, and it's going to spread it out all over the fly. Just like that. And then when you get it exactly where you want it, grab it with the other hand and lock it down with some thread wraps. Just like that. I've got a couple of longer pieces out here. I don't want them super long, so I'm going to kind of come in and cut those off. But now your flash is wrapped all the way around the side of the fly, on top, on the other side. And we've got a fly that's pretty flashy. But we can always come in and cut this out of here. Now we're going to come in with rubber legs. So I'm using skirt material for like a spinnerbait skirt from Mertens. And the reason I chose this is because I just thought that color was cool, where it's got this kind of brown and bright orange variation. It reminded me of the end of the pincers of like a northern crayfish. So I got some of that. And then you just cut out the little rubber piece that holds them together. And you get a little bundle like this. This is 5 of them. You can use 3, you can use 6, you can use 4, whatever you want. I think 5 is plenty. But remember, we're trying to emulate like a jig, a conventional style jig. So we want to put some rubber legs in there. So I'll wrap them onto one side of the hook, and then I'll grab them and pull them, not too tight to break them, but pull them hard enough to where I can get a thread wrap on the other side. Let me show you this where the camera can see it a little bit better. So right now I'm on top. I'm going to wrap them onto the other side and put a trap wrap on the other side, so that I have rubber legs on both sides of the fly. And then I'm going to put down a really good thread base, because that rubber is slippery and it will come out of there if you're not careful. So then oftentimes at this point on the fly, I'll come through, I'll look at my rubber legs, and I'll think, okay, I kind of want to cut some of these out. They don't have to be all the same length. I'll cut them out to where they're about 2/3 the length of the tail. And then to add a little bit more resiliency to the fly, I'm going to come in with this stuff. Ordered this from Mertens. This is a Z-Mint. Essentially, it's by Zap-A-Gap, so it's the same stuff. It's just a little bit more runny, I guess you'd say, than Zap-A-Gap is, or like a gel super glue. So it will really penetrate the thread wraps. So I'll come in here and just dab a couple of swipes onto that fly, and that's going to lock in all of those materials. And then I'm going to wrap my thread over it, come forward of my bundle. So you see I've got a little bump right there, which is fine, because that's going to give us a little bit of lift for our next material application. So oftentimes I'll let that dry for 15 seconds or so. You don't have to. But then I'm going to come in. This is the hardest part, in my opinion. This is the most frustrating part of this fly. But it makes for a huge front head profile. So that's really cool. So I'll grab a nice big plume. This one is burnt orange of marabou. And I'm going to pinch it until I get about halfway through the fly is where I want to seat this. So I'm going to come in, grab it with the other hand. I'll pull everything down, try to get it flush, hold on to it right here, and we're going to put a big wrap over the top. 2, 3, 4. Really hold your thread pressure there. And that glue will also help you because it'll start to kind of bind to that marabou. I turn it upside down, or actually right side up since we've been tying upside down, right? And that's where we're going to come in with the next plume. Same thing. Going to kind of measure it off to the other one, get it the right length. I'm going to press it into the fly. Do a wrap over the top once, twice, get some good thread pressure, 3, 4, 5, really cinch it down. Now, what I want to look at before I go any further is kind of leave your bobbin hanging so you keep your thread pressure. I want to look at the sides of the fly. See how it's kind of a sparse right there? So I just kind of pinch my materials together right there to give a little bit more body on the side. And then this is probably the most frustrating part, is trying to cut out the tag ends of these pieces of marabou. So like I showed you, I think maybe on the last fly I did, maybe I showed that in a different class, but I twist it and clip it. I'll show you that again. I'll pull all my points out of here. I'm going to grab the top of this marabou and twist it. On a big piece, you really got to turn it. Get all the way down as far as you can and cut it out of there. Now, at this point, you could finish the fly right here. But if you want to add a little bit more flash, you can add in like a little bit of ice dub at the front. So I'll show you how I apply that. It's pretty simple with the ice dub. You can put it. I've tried putting it into a like a dubbing brush, and it just didn't work real well. I couldn't get it to seat the way that I wanted to. I've tried splitting my thread and wrapping it into a dubbing brush, and that works pretty well, but it takes a little time to split the thread. So honestly, I just do it like this. I just put it all on there, put a wrap over the top, put 2 wraps over the top, and cinch them down. And then I pull the other stuff out of my way, a couple more wraps, and then whip finish. We're done with this one. 1, 2, 3, 4. Get in there, tighten it down. Then I'll clip out my thread. So that's it on that one. What I'll do oftentimes is come forward, and where my thread wrap is underneath here, where I can see my knot is, I'll get some zoom in on there. Really make sure that I get in there good with that glue. Make sure that nothing comes apart on me. And then I'll push the head of the fly back into there, into that glue, just like that. Now, for some extra insurance, oftentimes I'll take my thread, come up front, and put a little wrap in front so that I don't get my cone sliding around. I've got a little piece of ice dub trapped in there. There we go. So just doing some wraps in front of the cone. Clip that out. It's seated pretty good in there. And that glue also helps seat that cone into position, which is kind of cool. Come in here, whip finish in the front of it. I'll do quite a bit more whip finishes in the front so that I can build up a little bit of a thread wall there in front of the cone. I'm going to come down, pull it really tight. And then we can get our scissors and we can clip that out. By this time, all of our glue that's on the thread wraps underneath the cone should be dry. So I'll come in with a little brush. This is like a little 22 like boar snake style kind of brush. And I'll just really get in here and brush out all of that flash back into the body of the fly. There we go. Come forward so you can see the whole thing. We've got rubber legs, we've got flash, we've got a huge profile for marabou up front. It's really going to breathe in the water. Light's not picking it up real well. There we go. You can really see that ice stub shining in there. And then one more step to make a long-lasting fly. I'll come back in with the glue on the head. That's it, guys. That's Barr's meat whistle. So it's the fly fisherman's answer to the conventional jig. fish it around structure, because it's decently weedless because it's going to ride hook point up. And you've got a little weed guard right here in the front in the form of that 90-degree angle on the hook. So you've got a decent little weed guard there. So fish it along structure, fish it slow and low, like ultra slow. Just strip, dredge, wait, strip, wait. And I mean, fish that thing super slow through, you know, rocky runs and things like that. And smallmouth will pick it up like it's a crayfish. So that is the fly.